we're just gonna talk about wrestling and yourself, Chris. So,
Yeah,
like we don't usually plan out too much for the, for the questions and stuff. We only really do interviews now. Last time we spoke, we did like wrestling news and stuff, and we realized there's just it's too much effort and too much time for very little return on YouTube, and it was a lot of work. So we just do interviews now. And we're trying to do.
The thing with wrestling news is like the turnaround's so quick. Like you report something on a Tuesday, and by the time Friday rolls around,
it's out.
Nobody cares anymore.
Yeah, it's a full-time job, man. It's like we were doing it every day, and I was just like, I can't. Like, I'm not working at the moment. I was like, I can't be doing this full-time and not getting anything back for it. You know what I mean? It was fun to do, but like you said, the turnaround is so quick. So we're just doing interviews now, and it's so much more fun to do interviews. So, and as I'm sure you know, being the interview king and all. So
that's a lot. It's a lot of work doing interviews. Like figuring out. But look, this makes it easier. The Zoom or Skype or whatever we're using, these days. But it also, in a way, kind of makes it harder too, because like there's, I don't know, like the loss of like human interaction with this.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing I've realized. We might as well just start talking now, because one thing.
Please. Let's just get into it. Yeah.
One thing I've realized is you usually do your interviews in person, and with the pandemic recently, you've kind of pivoted and found a way around that. Thankfully, we've got Skype and Zoom to do it. What's been the biggest challenge for yourself, like doing it over Skype and over Zoom opposed to in person? Because like you said, you kind of lose that in-person interaction that you get.
So I love being able to do interviews in person. I just love that interpersonal communication of being able to shake someone's hand, look them in the eyes. So look, I appreciate that now we live in a world where, you and I live on different continents and we're having this conversation in real time. I love that. But at the same time, there's little things that happen in a real conversation. You see someone's eyes shift, or you see that they want to interject. And as great as Zoom or Skype or whatever platform it is that we use now, as great as it is, and as great as it is at connecting us, we lose those tiny little things that happen in a real life conversation. It's just slightly clunky that if you start talking now, but I'm still talking, I have to stop, but then you've already stopped, and then we both stopped, and it makes this weird moment. So that's the only thing that I think, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Absolutely, yeah.
These are so much very more I'll speak, then you'll speak. I'll speak, then you'll speak. You know what I mean? And when you're in person, you can just kind of free flow.
Well, for example, your interview that you did with MJF is one of my favorite interviews I've seen, not just because he absolutely rinsed you as MJF would do, it's what you expected, I'm sure, going into that interview. But that wouldn't have worked as well over Skype, for example, where, he's got people delivering food to the room while you're having an interview with him. And, that was absolutely brilliant. But like you said, it's one of those things I guess you just had to get used to, where with the pandemic, at least you've still been able to do these interviews. Because I can't remember who it was, the first one that you did it with over Skype. But I was like, oh, cool, Chris is still releasing content. And it was good to see you still managing to do it. I'm guessing now you're keen to get back to that in-person style, though. And if you are, are you still going to do the Skype interviews? Is that something you're going to stick with? Or is it just going to be going back straight to in-person?
Look, I think we're all excited to get back to doing things in person, just in general. So, I'm excited to be able to do that when that's a possibility, when it's safe to do that again.
Yeah.
And I think that now that I've figured this out, now that people are now that everybody's figured this out, I didn't even have a Zoom account before March. I didn't at all. And, now I use it almost every single day. So, I think it's going to be a combination of both, doing them in person when possible, and then certainly, when I can borrow someone's time and just say, hey, click this link and we'll chat, I'll do that. And, you mentioned the MJF interview. I don't know if we can call it an interview because it is what it is. If that had happened virtually, I just would have hung up. I'm too nice of a person so that when that was happening in person, I was just all right, well, I've agreed to do this, so I'll just sit here and, continue this line of questioning and see what this leads to. But yeah, if this was happening, I would have just hit that red button and been like, hey, man,
see you later, Max.
Have a nice day. Yeah.
But yeah, I think last time we spoke to you, we were really impressed by your work ethic. Like, you were traveling everywhere to get an interview, and you were saying like you was getting flights across the country, just to speak to someone for an hour. And I think that's so respectable that you were putting in so much work to get anything you could, and you were hustling to get all of these interviews. And I think the cool thing is, like I said, you've been able to keep it going, and you've been able to use Skype to get these interviews, Zoom even. We hate Zoom, by the way. Absolutely hate Zoom. I can't get the hang of it. I like Skype.
Best thing ever, Liv and I have no idea how to. It's amazing I'm using Skype right now, Chris. But having to use Zoom, we spoke to Nikita Koloff the other night, and he does all of his on Zoom. So it took me, about 30 minutes just to figure out I had the thing on mute. I don't like it.
61-year-old Nikita Koloff had a much better idea of how to use Zoom than either of us. He was teaching us how to use it. So
that's funny.
Yeah, but as I was saying, like with Skype, I love doing interviews on Skype. We haven't really done them in person before, and that's something I'm really looking forward to doing post-pandemic, because it's something that we want to branch out into. But like with Skype, I mean, do you enjoy doing it? Like, I know you said like you miss the human interaction and stuff, but has it been eye-opening to how easy it can be? Like with technology, like you were saying, you can talk to anyone over the world now. We wouldn't be able to do this without Skype. And have you enjoyed doing it though? Like, has it been has it kept you distracted enough from the pandemic that you still feel like you're working on Chris Van Vliet and your channel?
Yeah, I appreciate that it's a possibility. Look, if this had happened 5 years ago, certainly 15 years ago, it'd be a very different situation, but we've all been able to pivot. We've all been able to figure this situation out. The cool thing is, whether you know about technology or not, we all have this little computer that sits in our pocket all day, and it's honestly as simple as pushing a button and then speaking with your mouth, So like, I love that it's as easy as it is now. But yeah, you mentioned that I'm not opposed to paying my own flights, paying for my own hotels to make these interviews happen.
Yeah.
Oftentimes driving long hours. But at the end of the day, it's like, I love it. I've always been a wrestling fan. I love just being in the environment of wrestling shows. So if someone says, yeah, I'm willing to meet up with you and give you an hour of my time, and I have no plans that day, or I'm able to take the day off of work, the very least I can do is just meet up with that person. It's the very least.
Absolutely.
So I think a lot of people will use that as an excuse. They'll go, well, so-and-so says they'll do an interview with me, but they live in New York and I live in this other state, and that flight's $250. Like, well, if you value it at $250 or more, go.
Yeah.
If you don't value it at $250, well, then you've made the decision really easy for yourself.
Absolutely. That's a really good way of putting it. I mean, it might be it's the only way that wouldn't work is like, if someone said, oh, I live in New York, I'd be like, oh, right, well, the flight's $3,000. It might be a little harder at this end, but absolutely, if they're in the same country and if they're within a drive or a short flight, absolutely do it. And I've just seen as well, looking at this little setup you've got right now, it looks like you've adjusted really well to doing the video kind of stuff. You've got your nice little belt in the background, the Chris Van Vliet belt, and you've got your silver YouTube play button. I mean, that's a cool setup, man.
Kind of. I also feel like if I turn the camera around, you'd be like, you have not unpacked yet, sir. So I unpacked what was important. I unpacked my lights, my camera, my laptop. Some trinkets behind me here. So I recently moved to Los Angeles. I've been living in California about a month now, and I've done, I don't know, between the interviews that I've done and the interviews where I've been interviewed, I've done, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 of these. So I'm just like, I gotta find a corner of my apartment.
It looks great.
And make it look half decent, okay? Like, I could turn like this way and you'd be like, why is there a kitchen in the background?
That still looks weird. Great though. I mean, if you look here, this is my bed where I sleep. I mean, there's a load of boxes here. This is as professional as it gets for me. You've at least got, your silver play button. That I think that's awesome as it is. Like, that's such a cool little thing to have.
This interview, my ironing was in the way. I mean, we're so professional here. I had a cat hanging off me. I had my ironing at this side. It was just the most professional stuff you'll ever see.
Got an American flag bandana. That's.
Oh wow! Jeez. I like that you've got the blur background going on there, like the blur setting.
Tell you why I've got the blur background on, because when you take it off, you realize, like, it is actually just a bedroom.
Oh, I wonder if I can do this.
And like, I do actually have like a backdrop with wrestling posters and stuff, but there is nothing to actually put the.
Now I'm sitting in an office.
Oh yeah, you know what, Chris? I'm also in that office.
What? Oh wow, you're in my office. That's crazy. Well, now I'm in a laboratory.
And I'm not even on this planet anymore, Chris. So Jamie is sat here. Jamie's wondering how we're doing this.
Yeah,
this technology is great.
That's a nice room.
I'm just saying.
All right.
I might stick with this. That's all right.
That actually looks real. Like that looks like you're in a beautiful, flat somewhere.
So yeah, Chris, this is my house. You like my mirror, which doesn't have me in it for some reason.
That's a great mirror, yeah. And what a nice view you have.
I'm not even in.
How the hell are you two doing this?
I was waiting for that. I knew he was.
It's magic, Jamie. It's magic.
It really is. I have no idea what you've just done. That is the most confusing thing. I'm sat in my kitchen. I don't get this. You're scaring me, all right? I don't like this.
That is pretty cool, actually. I didn't realize how good those automated backgrounds were. Some of those looked pretty legit.
We've learned, if COVID has taught us anything, it's that we now have great Skype backgrounds, because these did not exist in February, not like this.
No, I mean, I feel like the Skypes had to up the game, if anything. Like, if people are working from home, you need to at least look like you're in an office.
Yeah. So this is another cool factor with this. And, my background's in entertainment journalism, and a lot of these celebrities, actors are doing interviews like this too. What's being cool about it is, sure, you can't be in the same room as them, physically shaking their hand, but now it's almost cooler that you're being invited into their home. So you're having a conversation with George Clooney or Sandra Bullock or whomever, and you are in their living room. Like, it's really cool. And I know there's been like these segments on different TV shows or these websites where it's like picking out like the things in their background. Like, oh, really? Oh, man, Brad Pitt has that on his shelf?
I've got to agree with you there, actually. It's something that I did think about when we spoke to Vampiro, and he was sat in a basement. And I was always thinking the whole interview was, that's what Vampiro's basement looks like. Like,
that's right.
It's a very weird, surreal thing to think. And like with anyone else, it's like, that's what your sofa looks like. Little trivial facts, like that's what their sofa looks like. Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one who has those weird thoughts, Chris.
No, I think that's all of us. And look, and I think the interesting thing about the situation we're in right now is we're seeing these Skype, Zoom interviews everywhere. They're on mainstream television now. Even when stuff does get back to normal, I could definitely see people being like, really? You need me to fly all the way to wherever to be on your talk show? Why don't you just send me a link? I'll click a button and save us all a bunch of time and money.
Yeah, that's so true.
I think that's going to happen. I think you're going to see that happen a lot now. The world's going to change so much.
Yeah.
Technology is going to play, and if God help us, it's going to play an even bigger part now in what we do. I was reading something today where someone was talking about, should the WWE not bring fans back at all and just stick with the Thunderdome?
Don't bring them back whatsoever.
Yeah.
That was a legit question. Yeah.
I mean, we're 2 days into the Thunderdome, and I don't want to mention what was shown, but there's been some pretty horrific things shown on the Thunderdome screens by some of the fans. Can you imagine if that became normal and they just didn't bring fans back whatsoever? What we might be seeing 10 years down the line? I mean, it would just be a challenge of who can show the most horrific things. Like that's what it would be.
Yeah.
People would actually just watch Raw to see the screens.
I'm actually surprised with how much control there is over everything in WWE. I'm actually surprised they're letting people do that live. I actually would think that WWE would go, all right, we're going to ask you to record 15 seconds of you just kind of sitting there.
Yeah.
And then that's it. And then that can play on a loop in the back, right? Just like the fans in the video game. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Generic
I'm so surprised that they were letting people do this live. Who knows what'll happen in a week or 2 or 5, but
absolutely. I was surprised when I thought the Thunderdome was just going to be, it's the Thunderdome with the cool visuals, with the wrestlers in the crowd again. And I think that's what it might end up being down the line. I think when you see how many screens they've bought to do that, they must have put a few $1 million into making it look as nice as it does. And I put on Twitter earlier, this is why we can't have nice things, because people just think, how can I exploit this? And some of them have been funny, like the Pikachu face made me laugh. Some of the things I've seen have made me cringe a bit. It's just such a cool idea. I mean, if we can't have fans back yet in full capacity, at least have tried something different, Chris. At least in this pandemic era, it's something we've never seen before. And what was your initial reaction to the Thunderdome? Did you think it was going to work, or did you expect this to happen?
I wasn't sure. And the interesting thing about wrestling fans, as you know, is wrestling fans are very quick to judge. And just the idea of the Thunderdome, before anyone had seen anything, just the idea of it already had people going, well, this isn't going to work. What a stupid idea.
Yeah.
And then we saw it on SmackDown and went, oh, that's actually pretty good. Like, it looks pretty good. So I was just happy that they're trying something different. I think it looks a lot better than the Performance Center. And look, WWE has had to pivot right when the world pivoted right. And I'm glad that they're doing it. And WWE is incredibly innovative. And I just think that this looks a lot better than an empty Performance Center. The crowd noises actually do work. It's just not organic.
True.
And I feel like whoever's doing this, there must be someone in the control room physically pushing like a soundboard of buttons. Like that's got to be one person's job. Like, oh, boo, boo, oh, cheer, yay! So I just think I think it adds so much more than the where we could count literally every footstep as they were running the ropes.
So awkward. Like it wasn't the fault of the wrestlers or WWE. It was circumstantial. I mean, watching WrestleMania and just hearing the spots being called and the footsteps and everything in between makes you realize how much the crowd really distracts you from those kind of things and adds so much atmosphere to it, because it didn't seem like WrestleMania, and I know it was, and I'm thankful we still got it. I'm thankful for any wrestling we've got during the pandemic, but it just didn't seem like WrestleMania for that reason, because it was in the Performance Center. I'm not sure if it would have been any different if they had WrestleMania in the Thunderdome. I think it would have still seemed bigger and grander, but you can still tell it's missing something, and it is the live fan.
Yeah.
But at least, like you said, they've tried.
WWE is really good, though, at making every pay-per-view look a little bit different, feel a little bit different. So if the Thunderdome did exist and WrestleMania was next weekend, they would find a way to make it special. And my hat's off to WWE for making WrestleMania what it was on very, very short notice. I mean, I was planning to go to WrestleMania. I had a flight booked to Tampa, and I was going to, do the whole week of all the fun events that happened. And it was like, I don't know exactly, less than 2 weeks before that they had to pull the plug, change all the plans, figure everything out to put it in the Performance Center, and they pulled it off. And they made it happen. So my hat's off to them. Now, I'm very interested to see what AEW with limited fans is going to look like and more importantly, sound like. And I'm excited about that because, as you said, fans make up such an important part of a wrestling show. And even if it's just 10% capacity, which I believe is a little over 500 people at Daly's Place in Jacksonville, 500 people is going to sound like 50,000 people when you've had nobody there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we mentioned this.
Is that happening straight away? Well, with AEW, when are the fans coming back? Is that happening now? I've not watched this week's Dynamite. So I don't know if the fans were there.
I believe it's the end of this month that they're bringing fans back.
I believe I think it's a taping this weekend.
Yeah, so I think you're right.
We'll see very quickly. Yeah.
It definitely will make a difference, though, because, like you said, it will seem like a WrestleMania crowd. Even if you only have 500 people, it will seem like 100,000, especially to the wrestlers who have some crowd to feed off and some live reaction to what they're doing. I'm sure you've heard the same. Any wrestler we've spoken to have said they miss that instant feedback. Like, they do a move and then getting that instant feedback to what you've done just is so good to get. And I'm sure every wrestler right now is craving that.
Yep. And I think beyond that, it's like you can rely on the crowd to figure out if your match is working or not.
Yeah.
Now you're just kind of like, if the script says you're doing this thing, well, you're doing that thing, and you just kind of hope it works. And I guess you read some tweets later, and figure it out. So it'll be cool to see, I don't know, just how much more amped up with a live crowd the next couple Dynamites are going to be. And look, AEW's extremely fortunate that Tony Khan and his family own the Jacksonville Jaguars. They happen to have this open air stadium, this open air venue right next door to the stadium. Like, everything just kind of fell into place where this all makes sense. So, like I said, 10% is a little over 500, but it's an open air. I've been to Daly's place. It's an open air, like amphitheater. So essentially, you're sitting outside. Like, it couldn't have been a more perfect situation for them.
Yeah, Daly's place is such a cool venue anyway. I believe they did Fighter Fest for the first time at that venue. That was the first time we saw it. And I remember thinking, this is such a cool venue. This needs to be used for, like, weekly TV. And it has happened. Obviously not under great circumstances, but it's such a blessing for them, really, that they've managed to produce TV at Daly's place. And now they're bringing fans back. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. In AEW, Matt Hardy and Brody Lee, who have been there for half of Dynamite's history now, they've done as many pandemic shows as they have live shows. Brody Lee and Matt Hardy have never wrestled in front of a live AEW crowd. And that's mind-blowing to think of. And the first time they wrestle in front of actual fans in AEW will be in the coming weeks. And that it's so weird to think of.
It's a wild situation, but I've been saying this since the start. Everything in our world, doesn't matter if you live here, if you live there, if you live anywhere else, worldwide, our lives have changed a lot. And I appreciate that wrestling has been the constant through this. Sure, it looks a little bit different than it did in February before COVID. It even looks different than it did in March and April when these companies were all trying to figure this out. But I appreciate that wrestling has been this constant reminder of, like, all right, things are weird. Things are weird when you leave your house and you can't do the things you want to do, or you can't go the places that you might want to go. But wrestling's here. Wrestling's always there, and I appreciate that.
They could not have said it better ourselves.
That's you, Callum. Wrestling seems to be that one constant. It's that one constant that's always there. When times are bad, when obviously the world's going crazy at the minute, like you said, that one thing that's there is wrestling. I work at the hospital, so I've been like on the front line, so to speak, with the pandemic. So coming home from work at the end of the day, being able to still watch wrestling, albeit differently, has been a big thing to me. So I totally get what you mean. It's just that one constant.
Although I will say that I'm surprised the ratings have been as low as they have been, because before COVID, it was Monday night. I'm going to speak in East Coast American terms here. Monday night at 8:00, you might have had other things going on. You might have been out to dinner. You might have been working late. You might have been at a birthday party, whatever. You might have been playing a sport, whatever. In March, after we all went into lockdown, after we all started the quarantine, on a Monday night at 8:00, I knew exactly where you were. You were in your house because everybody was in their house.
Yeah.
And I was so surprised that the ratings went down. That meant that people were choosing not to watch wrestling.
Yeah.
Even the people that had watched were choosing not to watch, which blows my mind. In theory, the ratings should have been double, triple, quadruple because nobody had an excuse. Instead, they said, you know what? I'm going to watch something. I'm going to watch Tiger King, or I'm going to watch something else on Netflix or whatever. And that's actually been the most surprising thing out of the pandemic for me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I thought the same. If people are stuck in the house and there's wrestling on, you're probably going to watch wrestling. And when the ratings started to go down, I thought, why is this happening? I mean, all I can think of is that the product is so different with the crowd. And for example, that people have kind of tuned out to it and maybe thought, oh, I'll wait until the fans come back or something. But even then, for us, I know for us personally, I've still wanted to watch wrestling because it's wrestling and I need it in my life, especially during a pandemic. And it makes me think, like, in 10 years' time, for example, do you think people will look back on this era fondly? Like, will it be such a weird era of wrestling that people look back on it, like, in the future and go, oh, what a cool era that was, you know? Like, there's so many unique and different things happened. Do you think it'll be remembered fondly or not so much?
I think not so much, because the greatest moments in wrestling were created by the fans. You know, like my favorite match of all time is Rock versus Hogan, WrestleMania 18.
Can you imagine?
Right. So
the look around spot where with no crowd.
Right, and you know, in terms of the actual in-ring wrestling, that match was okay, but the crowd made that match so epic. So I don't think we're gonna look back at this WrestleMania 10 years from now and be like, oh man, it was so good. We're gonna look back. It's gonna have the asterisk next to it, and we're gonna go, it was good for what it was. Yeah. In the same way that, like, if you watched your favorite sport with replacement players because the union was on strike, or when the NFL had the replacement referees for a handful of games, we all kind of looked at those and went, yeah, it's just, you know, in the same way that, like, when whoever wins the NBA Finals this year, we're going to go, that's cool, but you didn't have to play a full season. And same way, you know, I'm speaking all in American terms here. Whoever wins the World Series this year, we're going to go, yeah, but would you have won if it was a full season?
Sure.
So I think that we're going to, here's the other thing. We're going to look back. There's going to be no highlight packages when things do get back to normal. We're going to see no highlight packages of any empty arena shows.
No.
And it's so funny. You'll see the buildup now for like a huge WWE main event, and they're using all footage from like the Royal Rumble and before. There's not like, you know, nothing's happening. No, it's like no one wants to like own up to like, this is the world we're living in right now.
Very true. Yeah, it's almost like a bit of denial at times where it's like, you know, like I found it funny when, like you said, with the crowd where they're not showing anyone any video packages with like the TV monitors, for example, from the Thunderdome. You know, they're never going to do that. And last night, I think it was on Raw, they still did crowd cuts. And when they did crowd cuts to show the reaction, it was just a crowd cut to a load of TVs. I was like, oh, God, wrestling's so weird right now. And it's little things like that which make you realize how weird the world is, where there's a crowd cut to 100 TVs, where people are just sat there like this.
Yep.
Oh, it's so weird. But you're right. That is a reason, probably. People don't look back so fondly.
What are your thoughts, though, Chris? Obviously, talking about all the pandemic and everything, it's given us the cinematic era. What's your thoughts on the cinematic style of matches? I think we're going to see them regardless of pandemic or not. I think they're going to be a thing now. Have you been enjoying them?
I appreciate that they've been a thing. And, you know, once again, we go back to like wrestling fans like to judge things. And I think that when we all saw the headline that there were going to be matches that were shot like a film, wrestling fans all across the world collectively rolled their eyes and went, oh, come on, this is going to be terrible. And then we saw the Boneyard match and went, that was actually pretty good. Like, considering the circumstances, that was pretty good. Here's what I'll say. I think that this is very much going to be a product of this time. And I can't imagine in 5 years that we'll be seeing too many matches like this, because WWE is so set up for the in-person experience. And I can't imagine being at WrestleMania and everybody looking up at a giant screen for 15 minutes watching some match. I just can't. Everyone's going to go to the bathroom during that time.
Sure.
So I just can't imagine this being a thing unless it's very special, unless it's a Bray Wyatt type of thing, or, you know, obviously it was done very well in Impact Wrestling with Matt Hardy. I just can't imagine them basically playing something like that in the arena and us having to go, oh, cool.
That's very true.
I mean, a friend of ours mentioned to me a few weeks ago, pretty much the same as you just said. And he said, you know, he'd maybe like to see once every now and then, maybe like a special on the network, where it's maybe an hour or two, and it's just a select few matches that are, you know, feuds done in that kind of style. I think that would work. But I totally get your point. Yeah, I mean, looking up at a screen, watching all these cinematic matches. Yeah, I totally get that.
It wouldn't work.
There's something really, you know, we all know that wrestling is scripted, right? We all know that the finishes are predetermined. But there's something about like watching that ballet, you know, unfold before our very eyes in real time that makes us go, I thought that guy had a chance. I thought Randy Orton had a chance here. But when you watch the cinematic match and you know that it's edited and you know that sound effects are put in, it makes you go, oh yeah, AJ was going to lose that entire time. Yeah, there was no. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like watching the Boneyard match, for example, was like watching a horror film, where you know what the end's going to be. Usually, everyone gets killed, you know. And Undertaker in this one was the guy who was stalking them, and he eventually got AJ and buried him. And you knew there was going to be an end to that film. But like you said, when it's an actual match, you're buying into every near fall and comeback, and without that, it's not really a wrestling match, so to speak. It is just a film piece.
Yeah. And look, if they did the Boneyard match live, it would have looked very different. I mean, Undertaker cut his arm open bad when he went through the window of the limo. If this had happened live, well, I don't know, what would they have done? His arm would have been dripping blood everywhere, you know?
It would have to have stopped the match, wouldn't it?
I would have to think so. That was pretty early in the match.
There's a question for you, actually. Yeah, just on a side note, let's just say, speaking of the cinematic matches, the Boneyard match, do you think that is something that could prolong the Undertaker's career, that style of match? Just your opinion, out of curiosity. I know we've seen the last ride and his content and this and that, but do you think that is a potential way of keeping him still going?
I mean, in theory, sure. He could do Boneyard matches till he's 70, you know? Like, absolutely. But I think that when fans do return, the best part about The Undertaker is his entrance.
Yeah.
So I would have to hope that, look, and I also think it was cool to see The Undertaker and AJ in the Boneyard match because it was cool, it was different, it was a product of this time. But I think that if we continued to see these, I think we'd kind of go, yeah, it's not the same.
Just let it be something that happened in this era, and you know, leave it there. And like I said, maybe that is a reason.
I'm just not ready to let go. That's what it is. I remember the Undertaker's debut when I was 6 years old in 1990. I think that 6-year-old part of me is still not ready to let him go. As daft as that probably sounds. I sound stupid, don't I? But
no,
I think that
I get it.
Just let Undertaker go just yet. So I'm kind of hoping, you know, he might stick around a bit longer. He might get another one or two. That's just me.
The thing, if this is his last match, and I believe it should be his last match, I think it's a great, like, he goes out on his own terms. And if he didn't like the way that something was pulled off, he could just say to the director, hey, can we do another take of that? And that's the cool thing, which you can't do when you're in the ring with Goldberg, for example. Obviously, you know, if the Goldberg match was pre-taped, that match could have been so much better than it was. We would have saw, oh, wow, Goldberg is concussed. Let's wait. Let's reshoot this another day, and we'll make this a better match. Instead, you just kind of have to roll with the punches. So I think that Undertaker was in the driver's seat here. He was able to make this look exactly how he wanted it to look. And sure, he's not in the ring. He didn't get that big farewell from the fans, but how many more times can we say goodbye to The Undertaker?
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
he's already had the big send-offs.
I totally agree with you. You are right. I'm just, that little part of me just isn't ready to let him go. But like I've said to Callum before, The Undertaker doesn't owe us anything. That guy deserves to ride off into the sunset, get his Hall of Fame nod, go home to his smoking hot wife. You know, he's he deserves that. He deserves that.
He does.
I completely agree.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It was on his own terms, and this was basically The Undertaker's perfect way of leaving, because it was what he wanted. And as a fan, I think it's just cool that he got to go out in such a cool and unique match, such as the Boneyard match, because I loved it, and it's still my favorite of the cinematic matches that we've seen. I just thought it played more like a film, and I actually enjoyed it, like watching that happen. I do think it'd be a bit weird if he came back now. Like you said, he's retired maybe 4 times, where it's been like, that's his last match. You know, he's lost a streak, he's gone. And then he lost to Roman Reigns, and you're like, that's it, he's gone now. And now with the Boneyard match, if he came back again, you'd just be like, all right, well, when are you actually going to leave? You'd never actually believe him when he's retired. It's like a Terry Funk where he comes out of retirement 70 times, you know, and that's just last year. But, you know, I think it should just be that should be the last chapter for The Undertaker. And what a better way. There's no better way to go out. It's on his own terms, like you said, and fair play to him.
I couldn't agree more. So, look, none of us would be surprised if The Undertaker magically showed up at WrestleMania next year in Los Angeles. But I think we'd all, you know, I think that it should end the way that it ended. I think you're right. Right off into the sunset, smoking hot wife, go live your life.
Yeah, absolutely. What a life as well. I mean, it's got a great legacy, and we've seen it before where I hate to like mention it because I love Ric Flair to bits, but he had the perfect retirement in WWE, and he even said he only wrestled again because of financial reasons. But for getting the money, he had to kind of tarnish his retirement in WWE, go wrestle with TNA, and then when he came back to WWE, it was like it just didn't have the same feeling, because we all knew that he'd wrestled somewhere else. WWE didn't mention it, but I wish that his last match was still WrestleMania 24. I'm sorry, I love you with Shawn Michaels, Superkick, 1, 2, 3, done, and that's it. But he even says he regrets coming back to wrestle, and I think it would be the same for The Undertaker now. He's had that perfect send off. If he came back, it would tarnish it a bit, I think. But that's just me personally.
No, I agree, and I think that anyone who has had a successful retirement has found something other than wrestling, because wrestling has this way of sucking people back in. It's like that crowd reaction is like a drug. Yeah. So the people that have been successful at retiring and staying retired from wrestling have been able to move on to something else. Like, just off the top of my head, Dave Bautista doesn't need to go back to wrestling because he has this other career that's doing great. Mark Marrow doesn't need to come back to wrestling because he has this incredible career being an amazing speaker. And I think the problem is a lot of people retire from wrestling because they can't do it anymore, or they can't do it the way they used to do it. And they just in their mind go, I could probably still do this. 80% of Ric Flair is still better than nothing, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to start a business, find a passion, do something else, and just close the chapter on wrestling forever.
Do you think in that case it might be down the line, or something that we actually see like a program for people who are leaving the wrestling industry on how to actually leave the industry? Not like therapy, but like a service which could help people exit the industry, especially when they've been in it for, say, 40 years. Do you think that's like something that could actually help? Like a service WWE offer, or somebody else offers independently, for helping wrestlers out of the industry? Because like you said, it's like a drug, that reaction. And that energy needs to go somewhere else.
Yeah, well, the cool thing now is, I mean, the internet's changed everything. It's obviously changed the way that we communicate with each other, but it's also changed the way that we interact and we buy things. So the cool thing now is you're seeing a lot of wrestlers who are currently under contract that are showing off their entrepreneurial skills, starting a business, starting a clothing line, starting a YouTube channel, starting a podcast. So at least they have some sort of skill that if A, they get released, like a lot of wrestlers got released in April, or B, get injured and can't wrestle anymore, they can at least go, oh, well, I've got this other thing. Like the Bellas are an incredible example of that. Toto Bellas, obviously came about, which has been great, but a podcast, which is very popular, a wine line, clothing line. I think it's just important to go, now that I have a little bit of a platform, let's figure out how I can make some money off of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for example, Ryback, he's done really well for himself. I've been following his stuff recently. He's got a nutrition line, and he does a podcast and the YouTube channel. He does everything basically which you've just said. He's really branched out to do that, like post-wrestling life. And I think he's at the point now where he wouldn't need to come back. I'd still personally like to see him come back, because I thought he was great. But he's a prime example of, like you said, finding that entrepreneurial thing to do outside of wrestling, put all your energy into it. And the Bellas, like you said, they're now like at the point where, they were great wrestlers and they were great personalities, but people are knowing them now for things outside of wrestling. Yeah. And I think that's important too.
My girlfriend's never seen a Bellas match ever, but completely knows who they are. So that's a perfect example. And look, I think the other thing is, if you have a decent career and you've made a decent following on Instagram or Facebook, those opportunities are going to come to you. Maybe you're not that business savvy, but someone's going to come around and go, hey, why don't we start a clothing line? You can be the face of it, and we'll give you 10%, 20% of the company. And I think I don't know if WWE needs to create a program, because the world we're living in now is allowing us to, once again, do everything from this thing that sits in our pocket, which is so exciting. Look, I'm a great example of this. I'm wearing the T-shirt of my fishing and hat of my fishing company, huge bass fisherman. I'm very passionate about it. So my buddy and I started a fishing company called Tungsten, and it's all been because we can do this online.
I was going to ask you, might as well talk about it now. That merch that you're wearing, I was like, okay, his T-shirt says woo, his hat says woo. I really like that hat. That's a great hat. It's on Instagram, I'm guessing. Give it a quick plug, because I'm going to follow it right now.
We are Tungsten on Instagram. That's how you have to say it. And of course, wrestling fans are going to go, oh, it's a little bit of Ric Flair. But when you catch a giant fish and you are jacked up about it, what's the first thing you do? Woo! Yeah! So
I love it.
It's called Woo! Tungsten.
I'm definitely going to treat myself to one of those T-shirts. I love it. It's one of those that you can wear as a wrestling T-shirt, but it's not. It's like you said, it's a fishing T-shirt.
The great thing about wearing this shirt to like the grocery store is people will just like look at you and be like, woo. Woo. I woo right back at them. It's great.
Well, that obviously, it's Christmas soon. My brother's a big fisherman. He's into fishing. So I know what to get him for Christmas now.
There you go. We have the best, I'll say it, we have the best tungsten weights in the world. And I'm so happy that we live in a time now that if you love something, like I love bass fishing, or I love pro wrestling, or whatever, you love mountain biking, not only can you consume all the content that you want based around that subject, but then if you really want to, you can start a company, you can start a podcast, you can start a YouTube channel, you can start an Instagram page around that. And this did not exist 10 years ago. And I just love that this is a possibility.
Absolutely. I always say to Jamie, it'll never escape me how lucky we are to have this platform. Even if it's not a massive platform, we still have one. And the fact that we get to speak with wrestlers and yourself and people in the industry will never baffle me. Like we're sat interviewing Chris Van Vliet right now. That's still a bit surreal to me. I might sound like a mark, but it's still really cool that we get this opportunity.
Well, it's true. Obviously, we spoke to Nikita Koloff the other night, and I'm a huge old school fan, NWA. And Callum had to calm me down before we brought him on because I was just like a kid at Christmas.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is, he's totally right. I mean, it's such a wonderful thing that we're able to do. You know, like you as well, Chris, we're all just wrestling fans at the end of the day. Look what we get to do. I mean, it's amazing.
And this is why I'm excited when I see fellow wrestling fans like you guys who are taking advantage of this opportunity and taking advantage of these platforms. You know, I'm no different than anybody else. You know, I just happen to early in my career have access to some of the wrestlers that, you know, maybe other people wouldn't have. And
Sure.
I just worked really, really hard to make this platform. But anyone can just start a YouTube channel right now.
Yeah.
Anyone can hit the record button on their phone and start a podcast right now. And that's what's so exciting about this time.
Anyone can, like you said, start a business too. If you want to start a t-shirt company online, you can just literally click a button now and have a website within 5 minutes and start.
And the cool thing about t-shirt is a great example, t-shirt company, because it used to be, even just a few years ago, if you wanted to start a t-shirt company, you had to buy 5 smalls, 10 mediums, 15 larges, and then like keep them in your house and then ship them out when someone bought them. Now you can just have a company that goes, all right, so yeah, let us know when you get an order and we'll ship it out and we'll just charge you $2 a shirt or something. Like,
yeah, it's so
changed
cool.
the game.
Yeah, like we absolutely right with t-shirts. It's even with our own, we're always like, oh, we need that pro wrestling tee store. It's like a dream for wrestling fans, I think, to have a t-shirt in pro wrestling tees. And obviously, you need a certain requirement to get there. We're almost there, but for now, we're with What a Maneuver, and they're a t-shirt store online as well. And when we had our first t-shirt design in there, I was like, Jamie, we've got merch. I was like, this is really cool. And it's little things like that which just make you realize how easy it is to do. And if you work hard, like you said, all you did was you had those opportunities and you worked really hard. Last time we spoke to you, one thing we took away from that is we just need to really focus on this. We need to, you know, put some time and effort into it. And we might be one man down. We used to be a 3-man group, but now it's just me and Jamie. And we're working as hard as possible to do it. And hopefully one day it'll pay off.
Well, it's paying off now. Like, people obviously know what you guys are doing. You're getting some great guests. I'm honored to be here. So thank you guys for sharing your time with me.
Oh, likewise. It means a lot. It means a lot when anybody shares the time with us. That's what I found. People always say, like, well, when can you guys do it? And I'm like, no, it's about whenever you want to do. There we go.
Nice cameo from the cat. Wow.
Absolutely. It's not a Ringsiders interview if you don't have a cat cameo. So this is the kind of stuff you get on a Ringsiders interview.
The cat is more over than we are. She's on.
Oh, yeah.
What's your cat's name?
Opie.
Opie.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Sons of Anarchy. I'm a huge Sons of Anarchy fan. So yeah, Opie's my guy. There it is. But she somehow manages to get out of every room that I put her in when we're doing this, and I just walk across the screen all the time.
She'll come and knock his camera over, like in the middle of an interview, and like just like, or even turn his camera off at some points, which is hilarious.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and I used to edit it, but now I'm just like, no, that's just part of the interview now. We keep the cat in.
Well, you said you're down, you know, one man here, but it sounds like you've gained a cat. So
yeah, I mean, really, we're still a 3-man group.
That's right. Well, a 3-person group, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, 3 individuals.
She's totally open.
Yeah.
I'm fairly more over than me and Callum, isn't she? But
people don't watch it for me and you, Jamie. They watch it for the guest and the cat. That's how I'm happy with that.
At least you know that. At least you're aware.
We're aware of it, and I've accepted it.
Well, it is actually her 8-month birthday today.
Right. So she's making it all about her. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Right.
I don't know if cats can have 8-month birthdays, but she's 8 months old today. So.
Of course, cats can have birthdays.
Yeah. Well,
the day they were born.
Chris, do you have cats? I can't remember.
I grew up with cats. I do not have any animals now, mostly because I was traveling so much. I didn't think it'd be fair to another life to go, hey, sorry, I'll see you in a week.
Yeah, that's a really fair point. Like, I always find it weird when people don't have animals for some reason. Like, growing up with them, I've always expected that everybody had like some pet.
Yeah.
But like you said, if you're traveling all the time, makes sense. If you could have one animal, would it be a dog or a cat?
I mean, cats are so easy. So I could probably have a cat right now, and like, just when I go away for a few days, just make sure their litter box is clean and give them food mountain. So I think a cat would fit my lifestyle more, but a dog I could go hiking with and go to the beach with. And, I think that a dog is certainly like more of like, a dog's your buddy, a dog's your pal. A cat's just kind of like, a cat's like the entry level pet. And this is nothing against cats. I grew up with two amazing cats. I grew up with Tigger and Velcro, and I love them both very dearly. But I'm just, we all know that a cat is a lot easier to take care of.
Yeah, I love this cat to bits, but don't get me wrong, she's a dick. So,
You know what the funny thing about cats is, if someone says, yeah, not really a cat person, we all kind of go, yeah, I get it, makes sense. If someone goes, not really a dog person, you go, what? Excuse me, do you also like kicking bait? What is wrong with you? So are you serious? You don't like dogs?
That's
and
so
it's like,
true.
why is it okay to not like a cute, fluffy, beautiful little cat? Why is that okay? Why is that all right?
I know the answer to that, Chris. It's because people think cats are dicks and dogs are just lovely, lovable creatures who want to give you all their attention. So it's if you don't like a cat, it's like you're just not liking an ignorant person. But if you don't like a dog, it's like you just, like you hate kids or something.
But how many cats kill people every year? I don't know the numbers, but
zero.
I'm guessing zero.
I think it's zero.
But how many dogs kill people every year? Millions. I don't know the numbers, but more than zero.
I looked at the numbers before this interview. It's millions.
So this is the thing. So someone's like, I don't like dogs because they could kill people. No, right. Dogs don't do that. Have you seen my little muffin here?
Exactly.
This is quite the black hole we've gone down here.
Hey, like I said, this is what we talk about on Ringsiders. We talk about cats and wrestling, and I'm a cat person.
Sorry, Carl, I'll tell you all that. Obviously, before we wrap up and whatnot, I know I'm going to ask you about, you did a little bit of work for AEW, didn't you? Interviews and whatnot. How was that? How did that come about? How was it like working for AEW? Who reached out to you? I'm assuming it was Cody or...
Well, the cool thing about AEW is there was no cats or dogs there, so I didn't have to choose, between one or the other. It was so cool. Look, being a lifelong wrestling fan, it was so cool to be invited to be part of that first episode on TNT. I mean, it's the first time that wrestling had been on TNT in almost 20 years. So for me to play the very small role that I played on that episode and then to be asked back a few weeks later was so incredibly cool. And it was just a combination of doing a bunch of those interviews, kind of like right place, right time. Like you think back to last year, I did an interview with Jericho, which led to an interview with Tony Khan, which led to an interview with Cody, or another interview with Cody. I'd interviewed him a handful of times, which led to an interview with the Bucks. And it was just kind of through knowing those pretty important people in AEW, they finally just went, hey, we've got this spot on the first episode. You want to join us? I'm like, yes, I do. Yes, I do. And the cool thing was, and I don't know if I've talked about this, the cool thing was they peeled back the curtain and let me know, like, it's going to be in Washington, D.C. And that news was not public. And I knew the first episode was in Washington, D.C. weeks before they'd announced it. So the fact that they trusted me with this information to not go public and go, hey, everyone, guess what? The first episode of Dynamite's going to be in D.C. That really felt cool because they didn't owe me anything.
No,
they
trusted
just thought
you.
They trusted me and just thought like, you're not going to say anything to anybody. And I thought that was a really special part of that whole conversation that, I really hold close to my heart.
What I thought was cool about it was we were just watching it and it was like, hey, that's that's Chris. That's awesome. Like you're doing some work with AEW. It's only a few months earlier at that point. You'd actually been when we spoke to you the first time. We asked you if you'd want to do some work for AEW, and you said you'd be open to absolutely any work with AEW. You're a big fan of what they want to do, and to see you actually then show up in AEW was really cool. Like, is it something you want to do again down the line? I guess that door's still open, and the answer will still be the same. But is that something you're keen to do again?
If that was a possibility, absolutely. We're obviously living in a very different world right now, which we've talked about at great length. So who knows what the future holds? Obviously, that role in AEW is not being used as much right now.
Yeah.
It's really not being used in wrestling, period, right now. I think it's the less people you can have in the building, the better. So, yeah, sure. When the world gets back to normal, I'd be open to doing something for any company, as long as I can still do what I do. Like, I really appreciate the fact that, I can run my fishing company. I can have these conversations with people like you. I can have my podcast. I can have my YouTube channel. I'm living in Los Angeles and going to auditions and doing some commercial work. And if I'm able to do stuff as well as, absolutely. And I never want to get in a situation, whether it's with a wrestling company or otherwise, where I have to do something instead of. I want to do something as well as.
I think as a fan of your work, it is the first thing that came to mind was, oh, right, well, if you're working with AEW, obviously I didn't know to what extent. I thought, does this mean we're only going to see AEW interviews from yourself? And I'm sure that would still be cool. But the idea of like, I'm sure you love speaking to people, you love speaking to people from any company. The idea of only doing interviews with one company would be one of those things where you have to take a step back. And I'm guessing you just want to keep every door open. You want to speak to anybody and everybody, but still get to do that work with like various companies. That would be the dream job. Yeah.
Especially as my podcast continues to grow, by the way, wherever you're listening to this, you can find my podcast, The Chris Van Vliet Show. So as my podcast continues to grow, as I start to expand out and not just talk to wrestlers, like I had Mike O'Hearn, one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time, on last week. I had Vitor Belfort, UFC legend, on recently. I was just speaking with Stipe Miocic, the current UFC heavyweight champion. Like, he's going to come on soon. As I continue to be able to have these other conversations, I definitely don't want to limit myself in any sort of way. And obviously, if we're speaking about podcasts, Joe Rogan's the best at this. You know, he's kind of accidentally figured out this incredible method that works and this incredible formula to be very popular and make lots of money doing it. And that's amazing. Like, great for him. The cool thing about Joe Rogan is you can't just put him in one bucket, because he is a podcaster. He's also an incredibly successful comedian. He is the color commentator for the UFC. He does some TV hosting. He's done some acting. And I aspire to have a career like that, where you go, yeah, Chris is a wrestling fan, and he has a podcast where he interviews wrestlers, but also he hosts this TV show over here, and he loves fishing, and he created this fishing company. And that's what I aspire to do. So if we ever had this conversation 5 years from now, we could be talking about, I don't know, a movie that I was in, or a TV show I was hosting, or all these different things. And I want to just be able to do as many things as I possibly can.
Or you've sold your podcast exclusively to Spotify for $100 million, like Joe Rogan. So that,
you know, and the bigger thing that nobody talks about with that is Rogan still makes the money on every single episode from the ads. So $100 million from Spotify, and then who knows how much he's making on the ads. Like,
that's crazy. Fair play.
He's figured it out.
Yeah, he's got it sussed.
It only took him 1,500 episodes,
but he did it. Hey, I'd do 1,500 episodes of anything for $100 million.
And this is the thing, like, that I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but nobody was a fan of the Joe Rogan Experience when it was episode 114. In fact, nobody was really listening to Joe Rogan when it was episode 413. You know, it took him a while to find his audience, for that audience to trust him, to organically spread the word. He's never spent a cent on advertising, and he has the #1 podcast in the world. So, you know, the Chris Van Vliet show, Ringsiders, we all need to learn from this.
Absolutely. I think that's a testament to the kind of guest he gets, because he gets those kind of weird people at times, like Bob Lazar, who apparently worked at Area 51. Yeah. A fascinating interview. It was like 3 hours long, but you listen to all of it because it's so different to any other podcast out there. And he gets those great sound bites.
He can have presidential candidate Bernie Sanders on and go deep into the weeds with those conversations too.
Yeah, that's what makes it so good. He gets such a variety of guests, and he's gonna ask those hard-hitting questions. He's not scared to ask anything really, because sometimes the more blunt the question, the better the soundbite he gets, and that's all the advertising he needs. Those sound bites get shared across social media. People check out the full interview, and that's it.
Yep, it's we all, like I said, we all have something to learn from that.
Absolutely. And speaking of maybe 5 years down the line, we might be saying you're in a film or something. Hopefully before then, Chris, we can get you back on and speak to you about what's currently going on. Maybe post-pandemic, we can see what's going on in the world of Chris Van Vliet. For now, though, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you again, Chris. Before we go, do you have anything? I'm sure you do. You're wearing the merchandise right now. Do you have anything you'd like to plug?
Well, thank you guys for inviting me back on. I've had a blast, and congrats to you. You guys have grown so much since the last time that we spoke, and that's the cool thing, is being able to track that progress. Another cool thing about the internet is being able to you actually can statistically look at we've grown in followers, we've grown in downloads. So I'm at Chris Van Vliet wherever you're on social media, the Chris Van Vliet Show wherever you're listening to this, and if you like bass fishing or you know someone who does, woo! Tungsten. Say it with me. Woo!
Tungsten. Yeah. Perfect. And you can find us at Ringsiders Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and Ringsiders Wrestling on YouTube. This is also going to be available on Spotify, Anchor, and anywhere good podcasts are sold. And we'll see you next time.